In the heart of Los Angeles, where the Pacific Ocean kissed the concrete sprawl and the Santa Monica Mountains stood like silent guardians over a city that never slept, Damian Voss lived like a king who had already conquered the world. His mansion, perched on a private hill in Beverly Hills, overlooked the glittering grid of streets below, a fortress of glass and steel that cost more than most men earned in lifetimes. At 48, Damian was the picture of American success, tall, broad-shouldered, with salt and pepper hair that he kept perfectly trimmed and a smile that could close million-dollar deals or silence a room full of hardened criminals. On paper, he was the founder and CEO of Voss Imports, a legitimate empire of luxury goods, real estate developments, and private equity firms that spanned from Silicon Valley to Wall Street. Forbes had profiled him twice, calling him a self-made visionary who had risen from nothing after emigrating from a small border town in Mexico as a teenager. But the truth was far darker, far more lucrative. Damian Voss controlled the largest drug distribution network between Mexico and the United States, a web of cocaine, heroin, fentanyl, and methamphetamine that funneled billions through hidden ports in San Diego, tunnels beneath the Arizona desert, and trucking fleets that rolled innocently across the border every day. He had built it methodically over 20 years, starting as a low-level courier for the Sinaloa cartel before outmaneuvering his mentors with a combination of ruthless ambition and cold calculation. By the time he turned 30, he had severed ties with the old guard in Mexico and created his own syndicate, La Sombra, the Shadow, operating under the radar of DEA task forces and rival gangs alike. His network was a masterpiece of logistics. Encrypted satellite phones for coordination, shell companies registered in Delaware and the Cayman Islands to launder profits, and a network of corrupt officials on both sides of the border who looked the other way for generous envelopes of cash. In America, his distribution hubs stretched from Los Angeles to Chicago, New York, and Miami. Warehouses disguised as furniture outlets in Compton received shipments hidden in false-bottomed shipping containers. Street crews in East LA, Compton, and South Central moved product through corner boys who never knew the face of the man at the top. Damian never touched the drugs himself. He was the architect, the ghost in the machine, sitting in his penthouse office overlooking the Pacific, sipping aged tequila, while monitors displayed real-time feeds from hidden cameras at drop points. But even kings have blind spots. For the last 3 years, Damian had been manipulated like a puppet by the very gangs he thought he controlled. It started subtly, with whispers from his inner circle. Carlos Mendoza, his childhood friend from that dusty Mexican border town, and now his most trusted lieutenant, had always been the loyal one, the man who had taken a bullet for Damian during a botched deal in Tijuana back in 2015. Carlos handled the Mexican side of operations, negotiating with the remnants of the old cartels, ensuring shipments flowed without interruption. He was the bridge, the fixer, the one who spoke the language of the sicarios and kept the peace south of the border. Damian trusted him with his life. What he didn't know was that Carlos had been playing a long game, uh, feeding information to a coalition of rival gangs, the Jalisco New Generation cartel remnants, and a loose alliance of street organizations in the US called Los Lobos. They wanted La Sombra dismantled from within, and they had chosen Damian's closest ally as the dagger. The manipulation had been surgical. Carlos began by planting doubts about smaller distributors in the network, convincing Damian to cut ties with reliable lieutenants in Phoenix and El Paso, creating vacuums that Los Lobos quietly filled. Then came the forged documents, bank statements showing skimming that never happened, surveillance photos doctored to suggest betrayals. Damian, ever the paranoid survivor, started purging his ranks, eliminating men who had been loyal for a decade. Each execution tightened Carlos's grip. Profits dipped slightly, but Carlos explained it away as market fluctuations from increased border patrols. El Jefe, he would say in their late-night calls from Damian's study, his voice warm with that familiar accent. The gringos are getting smarter. We adapt. I'll have your back. Always. Damian believed him. He had no reason not to. The money still poured in enough to buy politicians, silence witnesses, and fund private jets that whisked him between his LA mansion, a ranch in Montana for hunting weekends, and a beach villa in Malibu where he entertained A-list celebrities who had no idea their host was the reason their parties stayed lit until dawn. Life in America suited Damian perfectly. He loved the illusion of legitimacy it offered. Mornings began with a 5-mile run along the Pacific Coast Highway, followed by black coffee on his terrace while he reviewed encrypted reports on his tablet. Afternoons were for legitimate business, board meetings at Voss Tower in downtown LA, where he shook hands with developers and city council members who praised his philanthropy donations to children's hospitals that masked the blood money flowing through his veins. Evenings were for the empire. He hosted discreet dinners in private rooms at Spago or Nobu, where distributors from across the states received their marching orders over Wagyu steaks and bottles of Screaming Eagle Cabernet. No one spoke the word drugs aloud. It was always product, cargo, or the merchandise. Damian prided himself on the American dream he had hijacked, a man who had turned survival into supremacy, all while blending seamlessly into the fabric of Los Angeles high society. The first real crack in the facade appeared on a humid July evening in 2025. Damian was in his study, the walls lined with first edition books and abstract art worth millions, when his secure phone buzzed. It was a message from one of his Chicago distributors, a man named Rico who had moved more product than anyone east of the Mississippi. Shipment delayed. Feds hit the warehouse. Lost half the load. Need extraction. Damian's blood ran cold. That shipment had been routed through Carlos's contacts in Nogales. He called Carlos immediately. What the hell happened? Carlos's voice was calm, reassuring. A snitch in the trucking company, jefe. I handled it. The rest is secure. I'll reroute through San Diego tomorrow. Damian paced the room, his bare feet sinking into the Persian rug. He trusted Carlos, but something felt off. The next week, another hit. A major drop in Houston, intercepted by local police, tipped off anonymously, losses mounted to 8 figures. Damian ordered internal audits, but Carlos was always one step ahead, producing evidence that pointed to low-level betrayals within the US crews. Men Damian had already begun to distrust because of earlier planted seeds. By September, the manipulation had escalated into open sabotage. Damian flew to Miami for what was supposed to be a routine meeting with East Coast partners. The private jet touched down at a private airfield under the cover of night. As his armored SUV rolled toward the waterfront warehouse, gunfire erupted from the shadows. Bullets shattered the windows. His bodyguards returned fire, but 2 men died before the attackers melted into the night. The assailants left a message spray-painted on the warehouse wall, La Sombra falls. Damian escaped with a graze to his arm, but the message was clear. Back in LA, he confronted Carlos via video call from his panic room, a reinforced bunker beneath the mansion, stocked with weapons and a year's supply of food. Who is doing this? He demanded. Carlos's face filled the screen, his expression one of faint concern. Los Lobos, jefe. They've been sniffing around our routes for months. I warned you, but I have a plan. Meet me in the desert outside Palm Springs. I'll bring the proof, names, locations. We end this together. Damian should have seen the trap, but the years of unchallenged power had dulled his instincts. He trusted the man who had bled with him. On a moonless night in late October, Damian drove himself in an untraceable black Range Rover to the coordinates Carlos had sent, an abandoned quarry deep in the Mojave Desert, 50 miles east of LA. The American Southwest stretched around him like an ocean of sand and rock, the distant lights of Joshua Tree National Park twinkling like false stars. He arrived armed, with a Glock under his jacket and a knife in his boot, but no backup. Carlos had insisted, just us, like the old days. No leaks. When Damian stepped out of the vehicle, the desert wind whipped sand against his face. Carlos waited by an old shipping container. Flanked by 3 men Damian didn't recognize, hard-eyed sicarios with tattoos snaking up their necks. Carlos, Damian said, forcing a smile. Show me what you've got. Carlos stepped forward, but there was no warmth in his eyes anymore. Instead, a cold smirk played on his lips. What I've got, Jefe, is the end of you. The betrayal hit like a freight train. Carlos revealed everything. How he had been feeding intel to Los Lobos for years. How the rival gangs had promised him control of the entire network once Damian was gone. The shipments lost, the distributors purged. It had all been orchestrated to weaken La Sombra from the inside. You thought you were the king, Carlos spat, pulling a pistol from his waistband. But you were just a bridge we needed to cross into America. The cartels in Mexico never forgot how you betrayed them. Los Lobos owns the streets now, and tonight you die like the gringo you became. Gunfire cracked across the quarry. Damian dove behind his SUV, drawing his Glock and firing back. Bullets pinged off metal and stone. One of the sicarios went down with a chest wound, but the others advanced. Damian's mind raced through 2 decades of survival instincts honed on both sides of the border. He had always been one step ahead, but tonight the manipulation had caught him flat-footed. He sprinted toward the container, using it as cover, his heart pounding as he calculated escape routes. The desert offered nothing but open ground and death. A bullet grazed his shoulder, burning like fire. He returned fire, dropping another attacker. Carlos shouted orders in rapid Spanish, his voice echoing off the rocks. Finish him! The Empire is ours! In the chaos, Damian spotted a narrow ravine behind the container, a dry wash that snaked toward the highway miles away. He bolted for it, legs pumping, sand flying beneath his designer boots. More shots rang out. Pain exploded in his thigh as a round tore through muscle. He stumbled, but kept moving, the world narrowing to the rhythm of his breath and the distant wail of sirens that suddenly pierced the night. Had someone called the authorities? Or was this part of Carlos' plan too, a final setup to let the feds take the fall? Damian didn't stop to wonder. He dragged himself into the ravine, blood soaking his pants, the taste of copper in his mouth. Behind him, Carlos's voice faded. Run, Damian! Run all the way to hell! Hours blurred into a haze of pain and adrenaline. Damian crawled through the desert, using the stars to navigate toward the faint glow of the interstate. His phone was shattered in the firefight, useless. By dawn, he reached a remote gas station off Highway 62, collapsing against a dumpster as the first rays of sun painted the sky orange. A trucker found him there, bloody, barely conscious, and called for help without asking questions. Paramedics rushed him to a hospital in Palm Springs under an alias Damian had prepared years ago for emergencies. As he lay in the sterile room, IVs pumping fluids into his veins, the news played on the muted TV. Major drug bust in the Mojave Desert. Suspected cartel leader escapes. Authorities seek information on Damian Voss, prominent LA businessman. His face flashed on screen, the legitimate empire crumbling in real time. But Damian wasn't done. From his hospital bed, using a burner phone smuggled in by a nurse he bribed with promises of future wealth, he began to piece together the remnants of his network. The manipulation had been deeper than he imagined. Carlos hadn't just sold him out to Los Lobos, he had been working with a shadow player all along, a high-ranking DEA agent who had turned for the money using Carlos as the inside man to dismantle La Sombra and claim the spoils. Damian's purge of his own ranks had played right into their hands. Yet, as the painkillers coursed through him and the doctors warned of infection, a new fire ignited in his chest. He had built an empire once. He could do it again, but smarter, deadlier. 2 weeks later, discharged under cover of night and hidden in a safe house in the Hollywood Hills, Damian watched the city lights from a window overlooking the basin. His leg throbbed, his body scarred, but his mind was sharper than ever. Carlos thought he had won. Los Lobos thought the shadow was broken. But Damian had one final card, a hidden ledger of every corrupt official, every rival's weakness, and a network of sleeper cells in the US that even Carlos didn't know about. He dialed a number from memory, an old contact in Mexico City who owed him a blood debt. "It's time," Damian whispered into the phone. "Burn it all down." The war that followed consumed the underworld from Tijuana to New York. Damian struck first in America, orchestrating hits on Los Lobos safe houses in LA and Chicago using mercenaries he hired through offshore accounts. Bodies turned up in alleys, messages carved into flesh. The shadow returns. Carlos fled back to Mexico, but Damian's reach extended even there. A car bomb in Culiacan took out two of Carlos's key allies. The DEA agent who had betrayed him was exposed in a leaked file that flooded federal servers, forcing an internal investigation that paralyzed operations against La Sombra. Yet the manipulation's final layer revealed itself in the most unexpected place. As Damian rebuilt in a fortified compound outside Las Vegas, far enough from LA to evade immediate heat but close enough to control the flow, he received a package delivered by drone, a USB drive containing videos. In them, Carlos confessed everything, but the real shock was the face behind the ultimate puppet master. It wasn't just gangs or a dirty Fed. It was Damian's own estranged brother, Miguel, whom he had left behind in Mexico 25 years ago, presumed dead after a family massacre. Miguel had survived, clawed his way up through the Jalisco cartel, and orchestrated the entire betrayal as revenge for abandoning their bloodline. "You built your American dream on our graves." The video taunted, "Now watch it burn." The revelation shattered Damian. He sat alone in the desert compound, the Vegas lights twinkling like a mirage in the distance, and laughed a bitter, broken sound that echoed off the walls. The gangs had used him, but family had been the true blade. With his network fracturing again under this new assault, Damian made a choice that would define the endgame. He loaded his last untraceable vehicle with weapons, cash, and a single encrypted drive containing the coordinates of every remaining asset. No more proxies, no more shadows. He would cross back into Mexico himself, confront Miguel face to face in the borderlands where it all began, and end the cycle in blood. As he sped south through the American night, the highway stretching into the darkness toward the border, sirens waved faintly in the rearview mirror. Was it the feds closing in, or Los Lobos assassins? A final text from an unknown number flashed on his burner. "You were never the king, hermano. You were the sacrifice." Damian gripped the wheel tighter, the wound in his leg screaming, but a grim smile crossed his face. The desert wind howled through the cracked window. Ahead lay the Rio Grande, the line between empires and endings. Whatever waited on the other side, death, victory, or an endless war, he would meet it on his terms. The man who had ruled the drug trade between two nations wasn't finished, not yet. The headlights cut through the black, and as the border lights appeared like distant judgment, Damian Voss accelerated into the unknown. The American dream he had stolen now, chasing him toward a reckoning that no amount of money could buy. But in that final moment, as the tires hummed over the bridge and shadows lengthened behind him, a single thought crystallized. The manipulation had never ended. It had only evolved. And somewhere in the chaos of gunfire and betrayal waiting across the line, The true master of the game was still pulling strings from the darkness of both countries, waiting for Damian to step into the trap he had unknowingly helped build. The story of La Sombra wasn't over. It was just crossing into its most dangerous chapter yet, with the richest man in the underworld driving straight toward the fate that would leave the streets of America and Mexico forever changed. The engine roared, the border guards waved him through under false papers, and Damian Voss vanished into the night, a ghost once more, but this time the ghost knew it was being hunted by something far larger than gangs or brothers, something that thrived on the very ambition that had made him unstoppable. The chase had only just begun.